elevation, so everyone needs to get up on that level.
Okay, got it. So, May 31st, 2022, we're at Hearst Castle.
There you are.
A lot of those marbles and the power of these are graduated. Folks in the back, just come forward a little bit more. That way we don't trap anybody on the staircase. Yay! Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Hearst State Historical Monument. My name is Carson, and for the next 65 minutes, I'm going to be your guide for our Grand Rooms tour. Real quick, has anyone been here before?
About 45 years ago.
We did something right, you came back. So the bulk of our group is here for the very first time. Thank you for coming. There is a movie at the Visitors Center. Did anyone by chance watch that before coming out? No? Okay. If you choose to, on your return, keep your wristbands with you. That is your ticket to get into the Hearst Theater. It shows a quarter after the hour throughout the rest of the day. And it is complimentary to your tour, so you don't have to pay any additional fees. During our time together, I am going to talk about William Randolph Hearst, obviously this estate that took 28 years to build to the point that you're seeing it here this morning. We're also going to see inside the biggest structure known as Casa Grande, the 5 large entertaining rooms that for the most part Mr. Hearst utilized in the evening time to enjoy a little time with his guests, having a cocktail, dinner, and eventually a movie. We will also traverse through a series of staircases. So as we go, keeping us together as a group in the back is a colleague and a friend of mine, Margaret. She's also a fellow guide. Hi, Margaret. But she may gently encourage you to stay together as we are timed. Also, use the handrails, either concrete or wrought iron. That's about the sum of what you can touch up here. So outside of that, in the building, we do want to stay on our gray blue tour mats. So if you find yourself standing on an old Persian rug, you're definitely in the wrong spot, okay? Feel free to ask questions. We also ask for you to respect the collection in regards to taking photographs, just disabling the flash features inside the structure. Okay? Any questions before we start, ladies and gentlemen?
Are video recorders allowed?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Feel free to take either side of the staircase. What we're going to do is go up and take a right.
Yeah, it's going. Take pictures of
In Mr. Hearst timeline, he did have a lot of guests with kings and queens. So what do you guys think? Not bad? Yeah? You guys want to do a solid for your family? You can all gather up there right on that staircase and take a picture of you. Guys want to go stand over there? Perfect.
All of us?
No, just the children. Sure, whatever you want to do. So, welcome to what Mr. Hearst fondly referred to as La Cuesta Encantada, the Enchanted Hill. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with William Randolph Hearst, notably he was a newspaper publisher. But the land holdings all around us, and including what we're standing atop of, was actually an acquisition that dates back into the 1860s through the 1880s. And it was purchased by his father, George Hearst, who was a 2-term senator for the state of California. He was also one of the top 10 wealthiest men in our nation. And the family's fortune is really diverse as far as precious metals. It was based off of gold, copper, and silver. But for William Randolph Hearst, he, coming into his prime, would acquire over 28 newspapers and publishing houses. And 1 out of 4 Americans during the peak of his media career would be reading some form of his publications on a daily basis. Now, William Randolph Hearst was a married man. He had 5 sons born unto him, and of which there's over 80 direct living descendants. And technically, you just drove through a portion of a cattle ranch that's still held by the corporation. They are, of course, one of the top 10 wealthiest families in our nation. And arguably, they probably don't need the cattle that are out there. They're divested into many things, invested into many things, including still publishing houses, pharmaceuticals, radio stations, television stations, and of course, the internet, the digital world. But what we are standing atop of leads me to really the project at hand. So for William Randolph Hearst, by the time he's 57 years of age, he comes into the family inheritance of this estate, this hilltop. And he chooses the only certified female architect in the state of California by the name of Julia Morgan to head this job. Originally started with a few small bungalows, inevitably it branched out over to 127 acres of art too. There is 3 cottages. In fact, this one in front of us is not the largest of the 3. In fact, it's 3,600 square feet of living space. But technically, it's the mid-size. It has 8 bedrooms, each with a full functioning bathroom and 2 sitting rooms, kind of these social gathering areas. And it was always with the intention of having guests being housed there. By the 1930s, you would have seen the likes of a German by the name of Edwin Hubble. So some of you are familiar with the term the Hubble telescope. Bear in mind, he was an astronomer that was part of that idea of the expanding universe theory. That was part of his creation. Quite often, Mr. Hearst would have about 20 to 25 guests invited out for the weekend. And usually, the hostess next to him was not his wife, but it was his mistress, a woman by the name of Marion Davy, who was, coming out of the silent film era, an actress of fairly high caliber, and also very important in that role, the hostess, as the majority of the people coming out here were her Hollywood. So envision yourself being a guest here at the Hilltop. What do you boys think you did? You think you want to go swimming? Want to go see the pool? Perfect. So that was one of the most highly used recreation activities here, folks. Is our Neptune pool, our next stop. What do you think, lady? It's pretty hot. Very pretty. It does. Wait till you see the great big rocks.
Wetter than?
The water looks shallow.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. I like to swim in it.
I do too, but they won't let us. We're not allowed. We're not allowed to.
Only the weekends.
Right.
Are you allowed to touch the water?
No, we don't want to touch the water. What's that? I wish we could swim in it. Of course, for Mr. Hearst guests, any time of the day or even into the evening time, as it was electrified and lit throughout, they could swim. Now, for us in our time, generally speaking, we encourage people not to even touch the water. Although we do host a series of events that allow for people, patrons, to swim in this pool. In fact, coming into this weekend, Saturday evening, there's going to be 50 people that are going to be swimming here Saturday night at the cost of about $1,000 a person. And that is facilitated through what's known as our Foundation of Hearst Castle. It's technically a non-profit association. It helps do a little fundraising for restoration process, conservative process, and of course also bringing together underserviced youth throughout the state of California to put out their school tours. Now what you do have, again, is probably the most highly used outdoor feature actually in the state. The pool itself went through 3 different iterations, meaning there was 3 different expansive changes in this Hearst timeline. The first swimming pool was done in 1924. By 1928, they had tore that out, expanded it out a bit. And what you're looking at technically was finished by about 1936, so a 12-year timeline with 3 different changes. It does hold 345,000 gallons of water. It's 104 feet in length, and over here on our left-hand side technically is the shallow portion. So that's where the guests would step down those ladders. And then across from us is the deep end, and that is 10 feet of depth. And historically, of course, there was a springboard for the enjoyment of the guest community. Now notice the Neptune pool, it gets its name from what's called the pediment of that upper portion of that temple. You can see those 3 statues. The one in the middle, of course, is a representation of Neptune, the Greek mythology of Poseidon. He should be holding as a symbol of power over the seas, a trident in his left upright hand. Unfortunately, during the process of constructing that, there was also a notion between Mr. Hearst and, of course, his architect, Julia Morgan, to have changing rooms imposed into that temple facade. But it seemed better fit. In fact, the next stop takes us directly above what's known as the changing rooms on the Neptune Terrace. So as we walk up the staircase, that leads into the changing rooms, and that was constructed in the late 20s for the ladies and, of course, the men. Now, any questions, ladies and gentlemen, before we get a better view from above? All right, folks, just be careful on the steps as we go up.
Where was Mr. Hearst from? Was he from England, or where was he from?
Originally born in San Francisco.
Oh,
in
okay.
1863, he was a California.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think?
It's amazing.
It is pretty, isn't it?
Anybody live here now?
Security. 24 hours a day, security. Right?
Yeah.
We do have canines. But no, nobody stays in any of the structures as far as sleeping overnight.
This is so massive.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
You want to see something kind of amazing? You see up there? See a mountain way, way off in the distance?
Yeah.
As far away as you can see, that's how far his property went.
Wow.
It's 37 miles from here.
Wow.
Good to have real estate.
So all the cows we see on the hillside, that's all his, huh?
Yep. Still operational.
So who owns all this land now?
So around us, there's 80,000 acres of land. Folks, come on up this way on the right-hand side. The 80,000 acres surrounding us technically is owned by the Hearst family. But we own the hilltop as far as the structures, the pools, all the art attributes that you'll see.
We as in the state or
Yes,
the?
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. It's the state of California. It goes back to 1958. In fact, 7 years after William Randolph Hearst passed away, they started gifting this over to the state park system.
Wow.
So since that time, we've had roughly over 45 million people to this hilltop.
Wow.
Can you imagine having 45 million people walk through your house? So that's why we ask people to be respectful and, of course, try to help us keep this collection in the condition you see it for future generations.
Yeah, very cool.
This is literally the best spot in the world.
Chụp hình nha. Nhớ chụp hình.
They used this location. There was actually a photographer from Life magazine that came up, took this photo in 1957, and it was the cover of Life magazine at that time.
Imagine jumping.
So this is, without a doubt, one of the most highly photographed pools in the state of California. And again, you get a little better look at the basis of really the symmetrically driven bow arts that Miss Morgan is bringing to this estate as far as her workings as an architect. Julie Morgan would be consigned technically in 1919. This became job number 503. And as the years turned to decades, she would take on over 200 other construction projects. So quite an interesting woman, to say the least. We were talking a little bit, if you get a look around, you can see some of the mountain ranges known as the Santa Lucias. And again, technically that's part of the Hearst family
structure,
holdings.
make a
Now,
statue.
over here, we have one of the other three cottages. This is the smallest of the three. Known as the Casa del Monte, that's the house of the mountains. Each of the three cottages actually get their formal names from the views that you would see out of the front, off the balconies. But this is 2,500 square feet roughly. Again, this one's the 3,600 square foot cottage known as the Casa del Sol.
Okay, Mommy, get in. Come on.
What a lovely place to watch that sunset.
Come on, Mommy,
And
get
we
in.
will walk past the largest of the three cottages, and it faces somewhat
Chloe,
to
get
the
in.
southwest, known as the Casa del Mar. It overlooks the Pacific Ocean. It is, again, over 5,350 square feet, the house of the city. Now, around this corner, and we will inevitably make our way up to the main terrace, you can just see the two bell towers of the aptly named Casa Grande. Technically, you could take all three of those cottages, mash them up square footage-wise, and it wouldn't even take more than a third of the overall presence of the big house. Now, before we continue with our tour, ladies and gentlemen, any questions now? All right, so again, just be careful as we go up the stairs. When did it hear us?
Metal bars made out of gold?
No, they're covered. They
Plated?
do plate. Yeah, the gold leaf covering. Or I think nowadays they do gold paint.
Okay.
Gold paint.
Cái gì đấy ông cô gái.
I know.
She has in her hand a little frog that has a crown on top of it. And she's going to kiss it, it's going to turn into a prince for her. And it is completely coated in gold.
Yeah, I think they
Well, I can't blame her, to be honest. Anything is real. Not bad, right? Yeah. Again, what a joy it would have been to live in this. So as a young boy, he was out here about these boys' ages. And they used to set up large-scale wall tents to designate this area. But again, it's not until he's in his 50s that he starts this whole project.
Daddy! Oh my gosh.
He was invested not only in the United States but abroad. In fact, this is aptly named Hearst Castle, but technically it's not a castle, it's a modern structure. But he did own a castle as part of it. And for him, he's very thematic. If you look around, this texture is very Mediterranean. You've got Spanish and Italian-inspired hardscapes, esplanades, terraces, the invocation of a Renaissance-inspired gardens with the roses, the scents, the aromas of the grounds and gardens. But each of his large estates were all thematic. In fact, St. Donat's, aptly, was this kind of medieval style where he kept all of his medieval torture devices, suits of armor that date back to that period as well. So overall, including what you have here, and technically, folks, these are the oldest attributes of this museum collection, ranging from 3,000 to 3,400 years of age. If you were to see all 20,000 pieces of this collection, it's estimated that's even less than 10% of the So fortunate for him, it was an era driven, unfortunately, by war. If you look at World War I, very wealthy families throughout Europe were forced to let go of holdings from duty taxation to help rebuild their nation. And Mr. Hearst and many other opportunistic industrialized millionaires, of course, were able to acquire pennies on the dollar with these spent hundreds of years of their lives. But down below, you get a visual of that natural occurring deep-water south-facing port of San Simeon. And of course, the visitor center is located down there. But if you drive out,
you asked him about that
straight
pier.
across where the beach is
What is
located,
that?
you're in this kind of quaint little village. A majority of the
You ask.
adobe, if you will, kind of red tile roof structures in the mission style were specifically designed by Julia Morgan, as was two of the three large-scale warehouses that William Randolph Hearst utilized to house be it statues, paintings, tapestries, beds, furniture. Basically everything that came up here at one point was staged down below. And in fact, during the course of the build process, it was estimated over 90 different train cars filled with attributes were brought from the East Coast over here to the West Coast and inevitably up to the hilltop. Now again, as a guest of Mr. Hearst, one of the niceties that they were afforded technically, if they were riding in the limos that were coming up to this estate, drivers would go around the backside of the big house, and right down below us, with this other group of guests is located, is the smallest staircase from a road system. They'd be deposited there, then walk up and then get their room assignments. Now, through the three different cottages, there's 20 total bedrooms and an additional 38 inside the structure known as the big house. There was times, and it was usually around Mr. Hearst's birthday celebrations, that notably he could have anywhere from 80, maybe even 100 guests invited out here. But usually it was only about 20 to 25 for the weekend stay. Now, any questions, folks, before we go up on the main terrace?
That pier,
Yes.
was that used to transport goods?
So, yes, originally George Hearst had a pier built back in the 1800s. William Randolph Hearst, of course, expanded on that in the 20s and 30s. What you do have down here now was actually a creation by the California Park System. So, good place to do a little fishing and some sightseeing. Any other questions? All right, folks, we're going to make our way up onto the main terrace. You're good. You're good. So, this is the secret to keeping this place pretty, guys. This is Shannon. She's one of our groundskeepers.
Family go
One
together.
single lotus blossom right now. So, folks, what do we think? Is this a good
And the
name?
little
Casa
pine.
Grande, the big house?
Cute, right?
Technically, you have 4 stories of socializing and sleeping accommodation with an additional basement below.
Yeah.
Now, the basement itself is roughly 14,500 square feet, and then the 4 stories of the accommodation
have any water?
an additional 54,000 square feet. So roughly just under 69,000
Thấy
square
em bỏ một
feet
cái
in
nước
its
vô đây nó
entirety.
lại không cho
There's
bỏ mấy vào.
115 individual rooms. Again, of those, 38 are bedrooms.
Okay.
There's 42 bathrooms, 16 sitting rooms, a main library that houses over 4,000 volumes. There was a beauty parlor that was actually established on the left-hand side in what's called the north wing for the ladies to have their hair done during the evenings, I suppose. A fully functioning kitchen in Mr. Hearst's timeline, only one, which is kind of interesting considering the size and dynamic of the 3 outbuildings.
It's a cool one. Do you see it?
Everyone
Do
that
you see
was
it?
assigned to either the cottages or Casa
see that
Grande would
fish?
be expected to come together for breakfast, lunch,
Cool,
and
right?
dinner inside what's known as the refectory. That's the
Right
main
there.
dining hall here. You'll get a chance to see that as we go through Casa Grande. Now, what we have to the front of us, of course, is an implementation, and again, going to that idea of the Beaux Arts, is the usage of antique elements, be it sandstone statuaries, bas-reliefs, even the grill, where the families all gathered together behind them, technically at one point was part of the convent gate in Spain from the 16th century. Although, of course, it was never created to fit as you're seeing it. Technically, it
Chụp
has
hình
to
đi.
be modified
Đây, chụp hình.
from the front door for Casa Grande. And even though it looks as though this structure is built block on top of block, technically what you have is what's called castle cladding. It's a limestone veneer about 2 inches thick that's been mortared to the structure itself. And the structure is built out of steel reinforced concrete. Now that is one of the leading reasons, of course, why Mr. Hearst would choose a California-born and working operating architect, as Miss Morgan was very, very familiar with building in the world of earthquakes, if you will. Now in 2003, unfortunately, in December of that year, the structure and the outlying lands was hit by a 6.5 magnitude earthquake. It had an epicenter less than 3.5 miles. Now, structurally speaking, now, one of the things traditionally, of course, the guests themselves want to we're going to find ourselves going around the side shortly. But before we go in, is there any questions? All right, as we walk into the assembly room, again, just look down as you go in. Make sure you're on our tour map. And if you have transition glasses, just be quick.
Is she leading us or something? Yeah, he's teaching us.